So, good evening, everyone. Great to be with you tonight again on one of our webinars. Today, we're going to talk about a strange acronym, which is AVS, which anyone having a rather larger vendor account will know about. And we have today someone who's quite special and knows quite a bit about AVS, and we'll get to learn why and how. So first is we like to start with a fun fact. I know your fun fact, which is quite fun. So go ahead, Chris. And
The fun fact that I like to share quite a lot is that I used to be, back in the young days, I used to be playing tennis professionally, and I had the chance to give a private tennis lesson to Bill Gates, which is, yeah, I consider a fun fact.
yeah, how young or how old were you at that time?
At that time, I think I was 19, 18 or 19, something around that. So yeah, it was very interesting, very
Yeah,
interesting.
and you got a picture out of it, right?
Yeah, I did,
And you still
So
have to share that.
yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that's true.
Okay, and on the professional or more less fun part, what's your short story and why is it relevant for you to talk about AVS today?
My short story. So the short intro about myself is basically that I'm obviously part of e-Comas, which is an Amazon agency. I'm in charge of the mid to large enterprise companies when it comes to Amazon. Previous to that, I've been actually directly inside of the big beast Amazon, and I was part of the vendor management team and also part of the AVS team lead team, developing also the new services of AVS. So this is why I'm actually here in order to discuss the Amazon vendor services.
So let's dive into it. How would you best describe what is AVS in a few words?
AVS, in order to describe it quite easily, is basically a person that supports you from the inside of Amazon. It's a dedicated person that is dedicated specifically to your account and is supporting you on your growth, like obviously focused on Amazon.
Okay, and so why a bit of history? Why did Amazon develop AVS? What was the idea behind? Did they share that, or do you know that?
Well, the actual idea behind that is how to make a little bit of extra money. And then the other
I thought it
fact
was a
is,
charity. That's very
yeah,
interesting.
and the other fact is that there was a lot of complaining from vendors that the vendor managers are very busy and there's not enough service and not enough to offer. So that's why they've developed that AVS service in order to actually have somebody dedicated to the brand and to support them on special needs and give them that special assistance.
Okay, and so they say, okay, we're going to develop something, make a bit of money out of it, and try to address the need of people getting better support because, as we all know, on Amazon, the support sometimes is difficult to get. And why? So that's the reason for Amazon to create it. Why would brands take on AVS or go onto AVS? What would be the good reason for
Uh,
that?
that's a good question. So what I like to always say, what AVS is good for is number one is foundation. So if you have a weak foundation on Amazon and you are actually getting AVS, it's a very good start in order to create a base that you need in order to improve your content, in order to improve your supply chain with that AVS corresponding and working in order to solve problems that might need some special assistance, and actually have a like an internal contact that can reach out also to other teams in order to fix certain things quicker. That's more or less the main points I would say why somebody would invest. It's the brand growth that you're investing in.
And when you're talking about foundations, could we dive into a bit? What do you mean by foundation? So I understand you said it's about content. How would you define having the right foundations?
So at the beginning, the AVSs always do kind of like an account audit and an account check. And there will be then decided how your content is actually graded. They call it grading, and there's a certain grade between A to D. And within that, you then obviously see the room of improvement that the AVS is telling you on either improving your content when it comes to images, when it comes to certain product descriptions, on certain ASINs, etc., etc. So they like to call it IDQ, which is item data quality. And this is more or less the word that they use for content improvement.
Okay, and so it's making sure. So, if I hear you well, the one of the big targets is really making sure the content part is really, really good quality. Are they selling other things when they're selling it? Are they selling other types of services? Like, do they include advertising, for example, or other aspects of cataloging, or like opening cases, or helping with solving other issues?
Yeah, of course. There's a specific service booklet that AVS by now has created, and there's 5 certain pillars that fall under that. And one of them is, of course, also the logistics side. So there will be support coming when it comes to chargebacks, to shortage claims. So there's a much quicker and shorter I would say support channel in order to reach out and to get those big issues, I would say, because a lot of brands actually their main issues are chargebacks or shortage claims, to get this solved much quicker. So that's also another aspect. Another one that I like to highlight is the deals aspect. So Amazon, of course, has the big Amazon days, which are Black Friday, the Prime Day, even Easter, etc. And due to having an AVS, you might have you might have the ability to change certain deals quicker, to actually have the chance of manually adjusting deals and choosing a deal day. So there's definitely benefits to it in that regard as well.
Okay, and do they, like on the advertising side, do they do anything with advertising or not at all?
Advertising, not as much. What the AVS does is they do support on creating a brand store, for example, but when it comes to actual advertising, there's no support in that regard.
Okay, and I understand they have a very strong process, or very like a detailed process on how they're solving things with different pillars, and a whole set of uh, data and metrics they are following, and they're focusing on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. I mean, by now there's tons of AVS tools that are specifically created in order to measure certain KPIs, in order to give out certain reports to the vendors, in order to dive deep, in order to solve problems quicker. So there's, like I said before, there's a huge booklet that is being expanded almost every day, I would say, with new tasks that a vendor can choose from, which is, in my opinion, definitely a pro on the AVS side.
Okay, and like one flaw of the vendor system, when you compare it to the seller system, and that you have access to much less data. Like on Seller Central, you get access to a lot of data, and on the vendor side, much less. Does having access to AVS give you access to more data? Like, are they able to share more insights about your real conversion rate, for example, or what's happening, or your traffic on your pages, or how you're doing compared to your benchmarking, your direct competition, or things like that? Do you have access to that?
Yes, so there's definitely a benefit in spending again that money on an AVS, because you do have the inside knowledge, you do have like specified tailored reports that AVS is getting, that AVS can also tailor to brands, sub brands, etc. So you do have that extra notch of service that will support you and help you on growing, for sure. Yes.
But like if you're looking to have a bit of granular details about data available, would they provide that, or it's like it's still because if you look at ARA or even ARA Premium inside Vendor Central, the data you get is sometimes not very precise or it's very generic, and whereas on the seller side you could go very granular. Does the AVS will help you to get that kind of granular information, or is it still a bit not as granular?
Vague.
Yeah, vague
Um,
or
yeah, so it definitely gets much better and much granular by the day. I would say that the AVS gives you more detailed reports than a vendor manager if you would have reached out to him. And there's ASIN breakdowns and specific KPIs that you can actually ask for and get a report on as well.
okay. So we've spent a bit of time on the pro side on why it makes sense. So it makes sense to
Hmm.
build the foundations. It makes sense to get access to more data and to get like support to be able to start your journey on Amazon. Let's say, if I understand well, what would you
Yeah.
say are the likes the things the weaker side of the program, or put it another way, in which cases it makes less sense for you to have an AVS?
So I think you always have to consider certain factors, and one of them is, again, I'm going back to foundation. Once you have set your foundation, which is usually done after the first half year, maybe a maximum of year, you will have to evaluate and see if it makes sense to invest into that AVS. If it's worth the cost versus the opportunity, more or less, once you have created the foundation, or if it might be worth investing rather into advertising than spending that money into AVS, because the more you grow, the more expensive the AVS will get as well. So it can vary, and of course, the first year you might only have an AVS for one market, whereas the second year Amazon will try to sell you and pitch the PanEU AVS, which then almost doubles in price.
And is it a fixed price, or is it a percentage of the vendor sales?
It was a fixed price at the beginning, and it now actually is moving more and more to a percentage, to accrual. So yeah, it was it in the past, and now they're trying to move, especially for the bigger brands, into a percentage.
And are you able to share what kind of percentage that could be, or that very can really be random?
Yeah, that can vary quite a lot. It can be between 10, or I would say 2 to 10%.
Okay, so
So it
depending on
can
the
vary.
size of the vendor, most probably.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly, yeah.
so it can probably be several hundreds of thousands in terms of budget.
Yes, I mean it can even reach a million plus if you want.
Okay,
So depending, it's quite expensive, and yeah, that's, for example, one of the cons that I would like to highlight is that there's, on for certain vendors as well, a little bit of headcount still missing, or the argumentation is not always there in order to make sure that the vendor has the full support. So again, this leads me to the point of saying, is it worth it investing that much money for maybe only getting one AVS, whereas you could have, for 800K a year, you could have invested it in maybe 6 to 7, maybe 8 plus people internally, and actually build an Amazon team for your brand. So yeah, it's always cost versus opportunity.
and would they share any like ROI kind of number, like saying is there any conscious of what would be the return on investment on such an exercise internally, or not really? Because my idea and why I'm asking that is how would that compare with search advertising or even display advertising, which we were
Yeah.
talking about last week with Mark, and where you could easily get a 4-to-1 return on investment on search advertising, and 1 or 2-to-1 with display advertising. How like is there any metrics for that on the AVS side?
That's a topic that is quite tough to measure. because again, it also depends on the vendor that is enrolling. Some vendors will have exceptional growth the first year because they needed that foundation to be built, and they were quite weak on Amazon before. And of course, you will see a 4-to-1, 5-to-1 return on investment. Whereas others, you might only see 1 to 1.5, depending, of course, on the size and how the content is, etc., etc. So
Okay.
it varies quite a lot.
Makes sense. And yeah, you're right. It's like and as an agency, we know that any effort, like the amount of time you spend to help a company grow on Amazon, the return on investment is subject to the competitive environment, to the brand itself, to like their product availability and many things. So it's probably difficult to say. So, but for the advertising also to a certain extent.
Yeah.
One additional question: would you say there is a point where it makes sense in terms of how big your account is in terms of sales, and a point where it doesn't make sense, and on the other side of a point where it makes sense in terms of the AVS cost, and at one point does it become too expensive and it's not reasonable? Yeah.
Yeah, from what I can share, I can tell you that I would recommend it always to vendors that have at least 1 million euros / dollars of sales on Amazon. Below that, it
In COGS or
doesn't make
in that, like in COGS sales out, or yeah, okay.
sales out. Yeah. So before that, it doesn't really make any sense because it would literally eat up 30 to 40% of your money sold on Amazon. So and when it doesn't make any sense anymore, again, this is a tough one. It can be quite a great success, but AVS is very dependent on the person itself, on the person that you get assigned. So some brands will stick with an AVS for many years, even if they don't see improvement on sales, but maybe improvement on the logistics side. So my recommendation on that is that depending on your brand's need or your company's need, always make sure that you give your need over to the vendor manager when it comes to choosing the AVS in the first place, because you might need support or you might need somebody more focused on the advertising, but your vendor manager is assigning you AVS expert that is very strong on logistic, which doesn't really help you that much. So always make sure that you raise your voice when it comes to choosing AVS and making the right decision.
And can you like meet your potential AVS or AVSs? Can you have like an interview or have a discussion with them or pick them? Is there a
No,
recruitment process or not at all?
unfortunately not. There's no recruitment process. You can raise your voice and say what you want, but at the end, it's up to Amazon and the AVS team lead that will assign it, because it also depends on the capabilities, on the volume that they already have assigned to that specific person, etc.
So as usual, Amazon is very flexible, but mostly to end consumers. So yeah, I get that. We have a question about AVS, Amazon Alexa developer, or Amazon ads. So do you know if there is any AVS helping on the Alexa side, or like on voice recognitions and like voice recognition keywords and things like that?
Unfortunately, there's not. I know that there's AVS Essential, which is a very basic level of AVS that can support on that, but there's no specific AVS service for Alexa services or anything that has something to do with Alexa.
And for Amazon advertising, you said that the only part which is really supported is the brand store, which could
Yes,
be part of content, we could say. But for the advertising itself, per se, they're not helping like to do campaigns or anything else on the AV, because they are linked to the retail teams and not to the advertising team, right?
exactly. So they're linked to the retail teams, and what they can do is this is kind of insight that I'm giving you, is that they can of course pull keywords, do certain reports as well, if you grant them the access, because they will not have any access to your advertising account. So if you grant them the access, then they of course can create certain reports on that, but there will be no creating campaigns, etc., anything like that.
Okay, very clear. So I understand that you say, okay, if you're below than 1 million, that probably doesn't make sense. And in terms of checking how much you're spending, it's difficult to give a real insight depending on how much you'll generate, or if the ROI is good or not. It's probably how your relationship with the AVS is going, and if you feel that you're getting a good service, right?
Exactly. If you feel that you're getting a good value, and it makes sense for you to keep that internal process going, that internal support, that quicker support on specific topics, then it's definitely recommendable. But on the other side, what I can say is that AVS itself is a role that has a very fast turnover. So very good AVSs, sorry, do not tend to stay in that role for a long time. So this is one of my cons that I would highlight, is that there's always a certain inconsistency when it comes to AVSs, because once you're on the roll and you've done your job for the first year, the AVS might change, and you're spending 2 to 3 months of explaining what you've been working on the past year to the new AVS, and this is a little bit of a time waste. So this is one of my cons when it comes to AVS. But yeah, like you said, if a company enjoys that person and likes to continue to work with them, always keep in mind that it might change from one day to another, and that AVS will be pulled to a different role.
Yeah, okay. So I was wondering, like, if you start, everything goes well, or even everything doesn't go well, and after some time, let's say 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, you feel that you're not getting much out of it because the foundations, like you said, were set, and you feel like it's not working. Is it easy to get out, or is it like a very strong contract?
So once you sign, you sign. So there's no way of getting out for at least a year. But then after the year, you will, or most likely 3-4 months in advance, you are going to start renegotiating already for the next year, renegotiating the terms, seeing if you can, if you will upgrade or not, if you like your AVS, if you want to change on that side, etc. But unfortunately, there is no way out once you say I'm signing,
So
and
it's
then
each time it's for 1 year. Like you can't get
exactly.
like a 3 months
No, you
out.
can't, and there's also no clause or so that will tell you, okay, if you're unhappy after the first 3 months, you can let it go. No, unfortunately, that doesn't happen, because sometimes what the AVS service actually does is they have to hire. They have to hire specifically for you. So this is a key role, because those roles are not Amazon funded; they're more or less vendor funded roles. So what happens with that guy once the AVS quits after 3 months?
Yeah, poor Amazon. They will have to pay for it. Yeah, I get it. And we don't want that. Like, so two two tricky questions, like naughty questions. The first one is like, we know that for the vendor manager, they will look at your how much money they're making with brands, and they're factoring in everything, like all the co-ops, damage allowance, everything, the logistics cost, the costing they're getting, everything.
Yeah.
And will and just tell me if you can't answer that, but would they include the AVS support, the money they're getting into the brands basically profit they're making, or like the P&L of that brand, or is it very separate? Meaning that if you stop the AVS and let's say you were paying 100,000 just for the example, would they would it on their reporting look like they were missing 100,000 in terms of margin on that brand, or not so, or it's two separate things?
Are we talking about internal reporting or?
Yeah, like, because when you have discussion with vendor managers, typically they would say, okay, because they tend to benchmark you with other brands of the same category and say, okay,
Yeah.
compared to the others, our margin is significantly lower. Like, typically they always say that, but it can be in some cases, okay, when we're making less money because buy box prices are down, whatever, and they say, okay, we need to have better terms to to get to the profit level we want to be, and to be par with the other brands of the category. And when they factor in a lot of like all the costs into that sort of brand P&L, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And would they include the AVS inside of it? And meaning that if you would stop with that, they would expect to make that money back again in another way, like in extra terms or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from what I can share is that no, they do not include that. Vendor managers do have their certain goals. AVS is one of them, and AVS is set up as an agreement. So AVS is a separate agreement that once you sign, it's there and you pay it either as an accrual or as a fixed. And once you leave after a year, there will be no difference of any kind that you are mentioning. So in order to answer your point, definitely not. I mean, what I can tell you is that I lost actually the word for it. So no, let's keep it at that, because I don't want to go too deep into inside knowledge. That no, it doesn't. It's separate.
Okay, yeah, that's separate. And I had another question which also left me. So you're you're okay for now on that part. So if we try to summarize, like, it's great for foundations. You need to be careful about the cost versus what you're getting,
Opportunity,
and you
yeah.
can, yeah, and you need to have a good relationship or get to know very well with the AVS. And if it doesn't work, you need to like prepare once the anniversary of the contract is coming to probably have the discussion to stop it, and to probably use the money differently. Now, I have a question on that is, today, as with knowing what you know, and you have someone say, okay, I have 100,000 in my pocket,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a choice. Either I pay for an AVS or I spend that money on advertising, and let's not put another agency in the play. Let's say
Yeah.
they're not trying to find an agency which would be much cheaper than AVS, but that's another story. What would you say? Would you say that it makes more sense to invest in advertising and to generate more traffic to your page, or that it still makes a lot of sense to do AVS?
From what I would say is definitely that again, what we said at the beginning, definitely make sure to see if there is any opportunity for the AVS, if there is room for your brand to improve when it comes to content, when it comes to logistical issues, etc., etc. If this is already solved, then I see a much higher return on investment when it comes to spending your money on advertising, for sure.
Okay, so it's really depending on where you are on that curve.
Yes, exactly. Where you are in that timeline, I would say, when it comes to that investment. And I actually remembered what I was planning to say on the point before, when you were saying if it makes sense. And what I wanted to say is that when it comes to profitability issues on that point, they tend to, or vendor managers tend to ask for other agreements in order to close that gap. So there's other agreements or other funding that they will ask for that has nothing to do with that AVS contract, in order to argue for that, hey, we're not profitable, or we're losing there, the margins are too small. So there's other agreements that will be negotiated, again, that vendor managers have certain goals for, but we'll try to pitch it to you. So that's something that that came back
Okay,
to my mind.
but it does make a difference if they're not including AVS costing in the profitability of your account. does
Yeah.
make a big difference, because we know how they're sensitive about, if their margin, if your product goes crap, can't return any profit, and that the system stops to buy, then that means if you have a crap product, even if you have an AVS and you're paying for AVS, you still have to revise the cost of the products, right?
Yes. Yes. 100%.
Okay.
There will be issues of crap for sure, and the AVS will definitely need to take care of that.
And if you were to compare today between what an agent, say you've got a very good idea now of what an agency like e-commerce is offering, and AVS, how would you make a fair assessment of what, the pros and cons of the two, and how you would more go for the AVS and when you would go more for the agency type of support?
The pro, of course, of having an AVS is that you have that internal support that can escalate and support on certain cases much quicker, which is a great great
Pro.
pros. I'm sorry. So and then on the other side, which is again in a much cheaper service most of the time, what an AVS does, Amazon agencies do as well in terms of account management and opening up cases, supporting on logistical issues, etc. So yeah, you have to evaluate and see what actually makes sense for your business at that time. If you have an urgent need, if you actually need somebody on the inside that can get things done much quicker, or if you rather save some money and go with more or less the same focus to an Amazon agency.
Okay. And is there like, specifically, I'm on the advertising side. I'm because it's a very big part. So like, big companies tend to have like advertising agencies doing the advertising, and then they would then split and then use an AVS to support basically their teams who know less about Amazon, right? That's how, like, my experience of bigger brands tend to do.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. That is definitely the case, and you brought up a good point with Amazon advertising, is that this is, for example, one good pro for an agency that will go much deeper into advertising, that supports into in that advertising bucket as well, whereas the AVS doesn't. So that would be a con.
And one thing we didn't talk about, and if anybody, you can send us the questions you have as we've gone over the normal time we have the discussion, but do send your invites, your not invites, sorry, your questions. And actually, that was a buzzword of my question. How do you get how do you get invited to AVS? Is it something you can opt in? How does that work?
So number one, usually the vendor manager approaches you once you are seen on his more or less pipeline and you're making enough sales, you automatically get approached. Other than that, it's a very exclusive program, and it's by invite only. Of course, usually by the vendor manager of that product category that then invites you or will approach you in order to discuss this topic.
And you would, so if you're interested or you think it's a good fit for you and the vendor, you would sort of probably ping your vendor manager saying, okay, can you set me up with AVS? Is it possible that
Yeah, I
Amazon
mean,
say, no, we're not interested?
um, I would say I highly doubt that. And I don't know many cases where the vendor actually went to the vendor manager and said, hey, please set me up with AVS. Usually it's the other way around. So they will start pitching it to you. They will send you information, and then, yeah, it all evolves.
Okay. I have a question here. Can you tell differences between ads, AVS, and DSP? It's three different programs. That's a question. Is it three different programs?
Ads, AVS.
And DSP. So I would say search, DSP, and AVS.
The difference between, I mean,
But
there is no AVS that specifically does ads.
So
So
yeah, and the difference. So ads in Amazon, you've got two types of advertising. One is search advertising, which is the one everyone can do, and you've got DSP, which we talked about last week again. And DSP is like programmatic advertising, and AVS is Amazon Vendor Services, where you can get support, but it's more on the content side. They don't do neither ads or DSP, which is a different team of Amazon, which is Amazon
correct.
Advertising, where they give support. So it's three totally different programs with
Yes.
like ads, search, and DSP in the same team, and AVS is in the retail team. And then you have
Yeah.
another team which is marketplace for sellers. So that's different from the Amazon Galaxy. So if you have any other questions, please do put in the chat or the Q&A box. I remember having discussions with larger brands and which they were feeling they were not getting like enough for their money, and that and they were saying that the bottleneck was that the support needed to talk to ask questions to the vendor manager, and the vendor manager didn't have time neither for them nor for the AVS, and that they said it was a bottleneck. So how would you probably address that kind of issue?
So unfortunately, that could be sometimes the case for sure. It depends on the vendor manager and how busy that vendor manager is, because there's certain things that AVS can do themselves, but there's of course others such as vendor negotiation that the vendor manager actually has to do with the brand and the AVS can't. So yeah, like I said, the AVS has a limited amount of doing, and there's also other teams that the AVS will unfortunately have to reach out to if it's a logistical issue, if it's a deals issue. Even there's certain deals teams, there's certain logistical teams that again will take up time and wait time until you actually get the problem resolved.
Okay, that makes sense. So in that case, when in this case, that you could probably ask yourself if the AVS makes like is worth it, because if he's only funneling questions to the vendor manager, you probably can do it yourself, and you don't need someone
Exactly.
in between. Okay.
Yeah, definitely make sure that you hire or you get an AVS for the right topics and the right need, as this as what we just explained is not the right one, but maybe it could be content improvement or deal setup, things like that, creating a deals promotion calendar for the year. So when you actually think about getting into an AVS, make sure that they send you enough information. They send you the service booklets with the 5 they call it pillars, and from there you can kind of like pick and choose what you actually need.
Okay. And at the parting sort of wisdom concept, the idea would probably be, if I get you well, is when you're a large brand, you will do more than a million, so like a couple of millions.
Yeah.
And you want to get started, and to go the quickest way to get started is probably to use AVS, because with their connection they will probably be quicker than an agency. That's what you
Yes.
said. And then use it to build the foundations, and perhaps after that stop spending that money to invest in, maybe if you still need help, go to a more affordable solution with an agency or something, and then invest into advertising or other things, or giving better deals. Would that be something you think would be a good
I
strategy for
would,
brands?
yes, I would definitely back that up. Once you've settled and you've created and built your foundation, and you've gained even some more knowledge on Amazon itself on certain topics, then it's definitely a much better investment to spend it onto advertising than an AVS for a second or third year.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for all of that. If anybody else has
Thank
got
you.
any questions, this is the time. Otherwise, we are spot on with our 45 minutes session. And
Perfect.
I think it seems nobody has no more questions. If you have any questions, you can reach out on e-Comas.com or on LinkedIn or per email. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening and see you next week for another webinar. Thank you very
Cool.
much.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.